Hi, it's Carol Doherty. Today I want to talk about how to deal with the put-downs at work. There's nothing more frustrating as a woman engineer or a woman in STEM than having your ideas and expertise ignored, dismissed, or put down. It happened all the time to me, particularly early in my career when I was the new kid on the block. And a lot of the guys I worked with didn't see a point in listening to the ideas from a 20-something-year-old female. What could she possibly know? Well, it was really frustrating, and I had to learn how to deal with this. Is it time to take it on head first, or do I ignore it? What do you do? The answer is it depends. I know, not what you want to hear. I get it. But it really does depend. It depends on where is it coming from. Is it coming from a peer, a coworker? Is it coming from a subordinate? That's worse. Or is it coming from your boss or somebody senior to you in the organization? That really does matter because you need to pick your battles. If it's a peer, somebody who's roughly equal to you in the organization, and they do this all the time, I would say figure out a way to shut it down. And I'm going to share with you an example of how I did that in a minute. So if it's a peer, work on shutting it down. If it's your boss, you might want to have a conversation with him in private. You don't want to call your boss out in public. That's not a good plan. If it's a subordinate, definitely have a conversation with them in private. Always praise publicly, criticize privately. The one exception to that, criticize privately, is the peer. That may be best handled in the moment, if you will. At one point in my career, I was a materials engineer in one of two sister factories. And the two factories would send people from our area out to visit customers in the field to look at our product. How was it holding up? What was going on? What were our customers' concerns and complaints around one specific area? And so the two factories were going to go. And this time, neither one of the managers from our group, my boss and his peer from the other factory, they weren't going. So it was just myself and my peers. They said, oh, it'll work out. It'll be fine. Well, not exactly. Nate was somebody, he was my equal at the other factory, and he honestly didn't like me particularly, and I get the impression he didn't really like anybody, and he was really often rude and dismissive of women. I heard this from a lot of people. And so we were going on this trip. It was Nate and I were the senior people. We were going to be meeting up with Pete, who was our peer from a third factory. And then a couple of Nate's coworkers were going to be on the trip. They weren't in the same role we were, but they dealt with the same portion of the processes that we dealt with. So they were going to be with us. And Nate, of course, I'm the only female going. So, of course, Nate decides I need to make all the trip arrangements. Fine. I don't have a problem with that. I kind of actually liked being in control of what we were doing. I conferred with Pete because we were starting at his factory. What do we do in that area? And I made all the arrangements. And I was working with field reps so that we could go out and meet with clients. And I talked with one of the field reps and said, here's what we want to do. We set up a schedule, sorted it out, and came up with the plan of what customers we were going to see in what order, and then get handed off to a different field rep and go see folks in his area. We get to the meeting point with this one field rep, and Nate gets out of the rental car. We, all do introductions and all this, and Nate starts grilling this field rep on whether or not this was the right schedule. Well, shouldn't we be starting at whatever our endpoint was going to be? Shouldn't we be starting there? And Bill's looking at me like, what is up with this guy? Nate just won't let it go. So I turned and looked at Nate and said, I made all of these arrangements with Bill. He had complete input into it. He's the one who picked this plan. Bill, is this still the right way, do you think, to go about it? And Bill goes, absolutely. Nate backed down at that point. He stopped questioning every little thing I did because publicly, there were, 6 of us or 7 of us standing around when he got told, no, Carol did the right thing. He didn't like it. But it was what needed to happen in that moment. Otherwise, the rest of that trip, it would have been him nitpicking at every single little thing. I'm not going to put up with that. You shouldn't have to either. And interestingly, after that, Nate was a lot more careful around me. Also, it probably didn't hurt that when I got back in my office, my boss said, when you get caught up on your email, come in and let me know how it went. I walked in his office, shut his door, and said, I am never going on another one of those trips again unless you or Brian are there. Brian was Nate's boss. And he's like, why? So I told him what Nate had done. He goes, yeah, okay. Nate never went on another one of those trips again. I was trusted to go by myself, and some of the other guys that were on the trip went with me. Nate never went again because he couldn't be respectful. So we ended up with a better happy medium, but he kept putting down my ideas. No, that's not okay. So that was a case where with a peer who had no influence over my career, I did address it somewhat publicly to shut it down. Another time, even earlier in my career, I'm in a production meeting. We had weekly meetings talking about production. I am the lowest ranked person in the room. The guy who was head of production was sitting in the room, and I was reporting out on something I was working on with supplier quality and with this one supplier. And he started asking me questions, and so I'm answering questions. And I finally say at one point that if they can't get this right, we're going to be doing another round, and if they can't get it right, I think we're going to have to find a different supplier. Paul lost his mind. He starts yelling at me in front of 20 some odd people that if I could just do my job, we wouldn't have this problem. And I don't know. I didn't even hear half of what he said because I was sitting there shocked. The whole room sat there shocked. And he kind of crumpled up a piece of paper and said, well, if you just, he's just all mad and he's crumpling up paper. I said, look, I don't want an argument. I'm working through it with them and we'll see where it goes. Well, just do your job, and throws a piece of paper towards me and storms out of the office, out of the conference room. He goes into the main office next door, which is where my desk was, and my boss, and rants and raves to my boss, who happened to be his as well, head of the division, and about how I couldn't do my job, so on and so forth. Meeting ends, other people go in, talk to my boss, and give them their take on it. And Paul was the one reprimanded, not me. I actually ended up in the ladies' locker room in tears because this was a case where I worked to kind of, tone it down and say, look, I'm not looking for an argument, which just made him angrier. Confronting him more was not going to do one bit of good. This was one of those cases where a senior person was just trashing what I was doing that wasn't going to work to address it in public. I never even talked to Paul about it. I know my boss handled it, and that actually ended up being the best way to deal with it. My boss did mention it to me, but he just said, no, I understand you weren't wrong. And he said, I talked to him. And that was the end of it. We didn't have to make anything big out of it. And sometimes when people are putting you down, particularly if they're senior to you, you need to find an ally or find a way to address it privately. A public blow up is not going to help you. You're going to look emotional. You're going to look like you can't handle yourself. And whatever you do, when you do deal with put downs. If you do like what I did with Nate, stay calm, cool, collected. I wasn't heated. I just stated facts. Bill and I made the arrangements. Bill, is this still correct? Yes, it is. Great. We'll go with it. Key is to pick your battles, know who you're dealing with, and pick your timing. Manage your tone of voice, your body language, and how you approach it. And that's a great way to shut down the put downs. If you found some value in this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel below, or you can go to insider.caroldoherty.tube and get notified every time I publish a new video. Hope to see you around. Have a great day.